Hi class, today we're going to talk about measuring and evaluating web marketing programs. An important element of any marketing effort is measurement of your outcomes or your intended outcomes. And to do so, we need to establish appropriate metrics by which to measure or evaluate our successes. So this initiates what is a metric? Well, the root word is meter, and a meter is a form of measurement, and that's exactly what a metric is. A metric is a form of measurement. And it can be an increase in sales, it can be an increase in market share, it can be an increase in awareness, a decrease in churn or customer turnover. It can be a number of different things. It can be hits on the website, so on and so forth. But the metrics that you select to analyze your objectives depend entirely on what your objectives actually are. Why is it important to measure online marketing effectiveness? Well, one thing, it's expensive. You're spending dollars, so you want to have a reasonable idea of the return on investment of your efforts. And it's difficult sometimes because if for example, your objective is to increase awareness of your brand by 20% within a certain period of time, you have to have appropriate measures in place to measure it. That would be one. It's expensive sometimes to monitor these things. And then the other thing is, when you look at something like social media, what are your objectives? And can you really measure them? It's very hard sometimes in internet marketing to understand what your returns and investment are, what appropriate metrics are before you initiate a particular effort, like a website. So I left this slide in because I think this is a good slide as far as identifying different marketing metrics that might be appropriate. So I would say review those and ask yourself which of those might be appropriate for the internet aspects of your particular marketing program for your organization or your business. Now, a great distinction that the book makes is this difference in measuring between business performance and site performance. And what is the distinction between the two? Well, your business performance metrics would be something along the line of increase in market share, increase in sales, increases in profitability, increases in new customers. Those are all business performances. A site performance might embrace ultimately business performance, but they can have their own unique attributes as well, or their own unique metrics for performance. So for a site, it might be new customers, clicks, initial clicks, click-throughs, clicks through to individual or respective pages. Again, new customers, repeat viewers, and then ultimately you get into some of the business performance eventually of how many conversions, how many sales did you actually make. So site performance metrics should ultimately lead to increased business performance metrics, but that's not necessarily the case when you think about it. You could have a lot of activity going on your site, and you could be meeting all of your established metrics that you put into place before you, say, built your site or modified it, whatever. But if it isn't generating actual business transactions that are intended, then you'd have to rethink your strategies around your site. So here are some business performances that are related to site activity that are relevant. And here are some site performance metrics that I spoke about that would be relevant, that you would establish. Again, before you start a marketing effort or before you start a particular push, before you construct your site, what are your intended objectives and what are the metrics by which you're going to measure them? So this raises the question of what metrics are most important. And the answer to that is it depends on your objectives. And when you look at the objectives that are stated here, they all have a in common characteristic that I say makes for a good objective, and that is they're all quantified. And there's an old adage by Peter Drucker, I think, from Harvard: if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Or it was Jack Welch with General Electric, I can't remember. But it doesn't matter. All good objectives are quantified. And so in this particular example, you're looking to increase number of email captures by 5%. That's a quantifiable objective. It's measurable. And so then you establish metrics, complementary or corresponding metrics by which to evaluate whether or not you're achieving that overall objective. So you look at, in this particular instance, number of unique visitors, I had mentioned that, referral source, length of the visit, and the amount they stay on a particular page, the time they spend reading an email, so on and so forth. You can go through and you can look at these other examples that the book provides. But the thing to keep in mind again is that you want to have quantifiable site and business objectives and then appropriate metrics by which to measure whether or not you're achieving those. What you don't want to do with objectives are have qualitative objectives. We want our viewers to love the site. I guess you could measure that to some extent in surveys. But it's not a very good objective. A better objective is we want X number of new viewers. We want to increase brand awareness X, or we want to increase click-throughs by X amount. And so those are all quantifiable, and as a consequence, they can be measured. What you don't want again is fluffy. We want to be number one, or we want to be the most hip. Those are qualitative and they're all relative. They're very difficult to impossible to measure. One last thing, panel metrics. A panel is a commonly used way to gather information on the internet, and it usually involves a group of people that you measure their opinions over time. So in that time period might be several months or even up to 1 or more years. Panels are often paid, not paid a lot of money, but paid. And so you might hire these people in the panel to view your, let's say the eBay site or the Amazon site once a day or once a week for some period of time. And then you ask them the same questions on a reoccurring basis to see whether or not they're changing their opinions, and their opinions would change about certain items like customer service or clarity or overall site appeal based on changes that you're making relative to their answers at a particular point in time. So you'd say that your overall rating on a scale of 1 to 10 for homepage appeal for all the people on your panel, and that could be hundreds, might be a 6. And so you survey them about what their issues are, kind of what it is they don't like about it, and then you make appropriate changes and you see whether or not you effected a positive change.